What's up guys, Motocross Action is here and we have the 2022 KTM 350SXF. No, it's not a 450 and no, it's not a 250. It's right in the middle with an engine that's very similar and has attributes that come from the 250 and attributes that come from the 450 that make this bike a really fun bike to ride on the track. We know a lot about the KTM 350 as we spent many times and many hours on it over the past few years. We're excited to break down all the details that we know on this bike in this video. Alright guys, the KTM 350SXF is back for 2022 with only really minor updates. The only physical upgrade is the balancer shaft switched from a needle bearing to a bushing now. So basically the balancer shaft is inside the engine. It's made to reduce friction and vibration at the handlebars. It's got a small update just for durability reasons. You won't feel anything on the track. The rest of the bike, exactly the same. It's got an orange frame now. That's something that sticks out, makes it a lot cooler on the track. It's also got a blue seat cover instead of the black one. Updated graphics as well. So the rest of this bike is exactly the same, but there's one little thing you should know. This bike used to be a two-bike class for the 350 four-strokes with KTM and Husqvarna. Now for 2022, Gas is joining the mix with their MC 350F. We're yet to get our hands on it. It's the same platform that comes on the MC 250 and MC 450s from Gas. Now 350 class, 3 different bikes, and the KTM, as it is with the 250 and 450 model range, it has ready-to-race suspension on it. So what does that mean? It's got a little stiffer valving and it holds up a lot more than the Gas does. Also, when compared to Husqvarna, Husky has the lowered suspension platform with the shorter forks and also the lower rear end that brings the Husky down a little bit. So when you're looking at options and you're looking at a 350, you got the lowered suspension of Husky, you got the regular, more ready-to-race model of KTM, and now you're gonna have the Gas for 2022. So the KTM 350 is really right in between the 250 and 450. Yes, in displacement and CCs, it's right in the middle, but also when you're talking about the engine character, the 350 is definitely a unique one. It doesn't have the bottom end torque that the 450 has, but it has a lot more than the 250 does. It also feels a lot more like a fast 250 than it does feel like a 450. You can lug it out of corners better than you can on the KTM 250 SXF, but you really have to ring it to the top of the RPM range to get the meat of the power of the KTM 350 SXF. This bike is a rever. It wants to rev, and that's where you're gonna find all of your speed on the KTM 350. It's not gonna be something that you're gonna be able to lug out of the corners like you do on a 450 and still make all the jumps or make it up and out of the hills as good. So another thing about the KTM 350 that is very similar to the 250 is how the bike handles in corners. The KTM 250 is light, nimble. The KTM 450 is also light and nimble for a 450, but the rotating mass inside of the 450 engine makes the bike stand up a lot quicker than the 250 does, makes it a little bit harder to rail corners with, as with any 450 is compared to a 250. So the KTM 350 is actually only 1 pound lighter than the KTM 450, which is really surprising because on the track, it feels quite a bit lighter because the internal parts on the engine are a lot lighter and the rotating mass going on inside of there is a lot less. So that means this bike can lean over in corners and it doesn't pop up out of the ruts as quickly as the KTM 450 does. So kind of surprising it's not closer to the 250 in weight, because when you're riding on the track, it definitely feels significantly lighter than the KTM 450. As for the suspension settings, it has a lighter shock spring than the KTM 450. It has a 4.2 Newton-millimeter shock spring. As for the forks, they recommend 10.6 bar as the air pressure and the WP exact air forks. These forks are something that we love and really appreciate coming from Austria. The WP exact air forks have increased oil and air bypass notches in the forks. And basically what that means is they're blowing off pressure spikes. Air forks in the past have been known to build up pressure as they get down into the stroke and kind of give you hard harsh feelings at the front end, something that would be harsh to ride at the end of a moto. With the extra oil and air bypass notches, it's basically blowing off steam and reducing that kind of pressure spike that can sometimes happen on the older generation air forks. So in these videos, and when I talk to my friends who are looking to buy a KTM gas, or Husky, they're always asking, should I buy a 19, 18, or do I need to spend the extra money and buy a 2021 model? 2021 was when the forks got way better. They're exactly the same for 2022, so definitely recommend the new forks. Updated settings on the internals with the WP Exact air forks. They look the same on the outside, but believe me, they are way different on the inside. Diving into a few of the specs on the KTM 350SXF, this bike retails for $10,099, so it's actually $200 less than the KTM 450. But when you compare the horsepower on the KTM 350 to the 450, it's pretty impressive how much horsepower this bike pushes at the top of the RPM range. The KTM 350 comes in at 54.6 horsepower, which is actually the same as the Suzuki RMZ 450 peak horsepower, which also comes in at 54. When compared to the KTM 450, it's only 4 horses better than the 350 at 58. As for the torque on the KTM 350, now that is where this bike is very different from the 450 model range. The KTM 350 has 29.4 feet-pounds of torque. The Suzuki RMZ 450 has 34, and KTM has 36 feet-pounds of torque. So a lot more torque on the 450 models, where the KTM 350 does have some good horsepower, but not quite the torque and the bottom end grunt that those bikes have. You really have to wring the 350 out to get into the meat of the power. As mentioned already, the weight on this bike comes in at 222 pounds, so it's 1 pound lighter than the KTM 450. So diving into it, who is the KTM 350 built for? I personally love riding this bike, and I love talking about this bike on our videos because this is the bike that I actually spent a lot of time on before I became an MX8 test rider and before I became a pro supercross and motocross racer. So when I was racing in the amateur ranks, my goal was to turn pro in the 250 class. I had a good mod 250 from KTM, but I wanted to race in the 450 class at the amateur nationals and also at the local races. Me being a younger guy, I was 17, 18 years old, trying to go pro. I rode a KTM 250 a lot, and that's where my focus was, but the KTM 350 was a great bike for me to put time on, to get endurance on, and also to race in the 450 classes at the amateur nationals. So this bike is great for up-and-coming riders who are not quite ready for a 450 but want to race the 450 classes. It's also great for vet riders who don't need all the power that come out of the 450 range, but they want to be able to keep up with their friends on 450s as well. You'll be able to do it a lot better on a KTM 350 than you would on a 250F. So KTM, Husqvarna, and now Gas, the 350 model range. No, it's not the premier choice for a pro level rider to use at the races, but it is a solid choice for guys for vet riders who are looking to have fun, guys who are only interested in practicing and feeling good on a motorcycle, and for the younger riders who are trying to go pro or trying to do well in the 450 classes, but they're not quite big enough, strong enough, or ready for the full sheer power that comes with the 450 engine. So looking back, the KTM 350 in 2021 is exactly the same as this one, except for the orange frame, which to me is actually a big plus. I really like the orange frame. Looking ahead to 2023, we know that KTM is updating their bikes. They're going to have an all new frame, all new engines. It's going to be a completely new model in 2023. We also know that KTM is working on factory editions for their 250 and 450 model ranges that will be available probably around January, December sometime. We know that because KTM's announced it in press releases that their riders are going to be on new bikes in 2022. So that's something to look forward to. That doesn't mean you need to wait and not buy a KTM 350. If you're interested in this bike, you know that this one works well. It's got a lot of time into it, and it's proven to be a great bike, great durability wise. It's got the ultra strong hydraulic clutch with the Belleville washer internals. Belleville washer spring is by far the most durable and strongest clutch in the class. And the class is in all motorcycle class, better than coil spring and actuated clutches. So we like the hydraulic clutch Brembo makes for the KTM 350. We like this bike a lot, but that is something that you should know, that KTM is working on factory editions 250 and 450 that are going to be coming out soon. However, those are only 250 and 450 model ranges. You won't get a factory edition 350 this season. Also, gas riders, they're going to be sticking on the same platform for 2023. They won't be updating the gas next year, so that is something you should know as well. All right, guys, so that's it for their KTM 350 video. Overall, recapping this bike, it's a great transition bike between 250 and 450. It's got its own character. It's not a 250 copycat. It's not a 450 copycat. And I can tell you from experience, after riding factory 250s and some fully modded 250 engines, you get a lot of the same feelings just by riding a stock KTM 350. So this bike is a lot of fun to ride on. I kind of wish you could run it in a 250 class, and that would be some fun. But yeah, it's got the great Brembo brakes that we always know and love. It's got the great chromoly steel frame that flexes well, and it's got the great WP Exact air forks that we like as well. So this bike is light, nimble, fast, and fun to ride on the track. So thank you guys for tuning into this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you have any questions about the KTM 350, leave them in the comments below, or check us out on motocrossactionmag.com. You can see our 2021 KTM 350 test. Stay tuned to Motocross Action Magazine. Subscribe to our magazine so you can see our 2022 KTM 350 SXF test, our 450 shootout, 250 shootout, and more. We got a lot of cool stuff coming to our website and to our magazine. So thank you guys for tuning in. See you in the next video, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. We got a lot of fun videos coming out, and also some really cool shootouts coming to our YouTube channel as well. So thank you guys for tuning in. See you next time.